synergy, DevOps, optimize. Like, there's so many words that just frustrate us. They get used and they get abused because people don't necessarily know what they are. And my next guest is here to decipher that for us, to unravel the mystery. Because sometimes, just saying things, it has to have meaning behind it. I'm just going to whisper the word agile, and I'm sure we'll take it away from there because there's plenty that our next guest, Tim, can talk about these type of things. I mean, it's definitely an exciting discussion. I want to get into it anyway. I'm getting lost in the moment because I think it's just such a fun talk. Go away with it, Tim.
Cool, thanks, Darren. Yeah, it's gonna be buzzword filled, and I'm sure some of you out there will be cringing as I say some of it. So, how to implement buzzword? Thanks, thank you for joining me, and in our journey to understand how to implement buzzword. Now, replace buzzword with technology or process you might have heard multiple times in the recent days, months, years, a few seconds ago by Darren. But before we get into that and into the wonderful world of buzzwords, I'll introduce myself. My name is Timothy Mamo. I'm originally from Malta. I've been told I have a Welsh accent multiple times, but I am from the small island of Malta. And I'm a senior cloud native engineer with Container Solutions, who's is a consultancy company that helps companies transform not only the technologies, but also the ways of working and processes into a more cloud native way. Yep, I do realize that there is a bit of irony there with me using cloud native, the first buzzword you're going to hear through this talk. And there will be more, believe me, there will be more. So, talk is split into two. Split into two parts. The first part, we're going to take a journey. I'm going to tell you a story about Hip Company. And the Hip Company you might recognize. Totally fictitious, but you might recognize. And just like every good story, we'll then venture into the learnings of Hip Company. What have we learned from the story? I'm going to tell you. I love telling stories. And how can we tackle buzzwords? So, Hip Company. Our story starts with Hip Company. And as I said, slight disclaimer here, Hip Company is completely fictitious. It's not a real company. I did actually have to check to make sure that Hip Company doesn't exist. And any resemblance that you might think of to any company you might know, or maybe even work for or worked for, is completely coincidental. Bit of a South Park proviso there. Cool. So Hip Company is the company to be at. It's up and coming. It's fresh and new. It provides some kind of SaaS product. We don't know. It's a hip company. It's not really relevant about the products what they're producing, but they're looking at exponential growth. They're exploding, and everybody wants to work there. Everybody wants to be with Hip Company. They're the kind of company that has a ping pong table or table tennis, according to what part of the world you are from. And who doesn't like playing ping pong? It's not a problem that the ping pong table is in a meeting room. We can see that it is a meeting room because there is a whiteboard there up on the wall. It's got some notes, but we don't really mind. It's okay because who doesn't love playing ping pong? And the ping pong table can be closed and moved away. There's also a company-wide tournament where everybody gets involved at Hip Company. We could even use the whiteboard to keep the scores, in fact. So as I said, the ping pong table is folded away anytime and put in the corner when we've got a meeting. If a meeting is needed, the ping pong table moves away, and then once the meeting is over, ping pong table comes back out, and off you go. Tournament is back on. Loving Hip Company. Hip Company is also the kind of company that has a console. I'm sure a few of you are going, yeah. Or a Nintendo Switch.
Oh, apologies, folks. Looks like we lost Tim. He said the wrong console, I'm afraid, and we clearly aren't that big of a fan of Switch, so we had to kick him off the call. Hopefully, we'll be back in a sec. Apologies for that. I don't think I'm qualified to speak in his place on this, although I think we're seeing where this is going. I actually like this chat, and ooh, is he back? I think we've got him again. Tim, you there? Well, we've got his slides. So I'll just pretend to be Tim, right? But no, I think you should definitely hang around for this. Like I was talking with Tim a little bit behind the scenes before we began here, and I am actually excited to see how this one plays out because I think there is definitely something to be said of this discussion. By the way, make sure that you do add any questions you have as this talk goes on, because at the end Tim will be hanging around to answer those. Just give me a second. I'm going to check if he's back with us yet.
Hello?
Ah, there you are, Tim. Hello.
Oh, okay, cool. I wasn't sure if I was talking to myself then.
Yeah, apologies for that. I saw the slides moving. I was like, no, he's definitely here. He's just not connected. So apologies for that, folks. I think you cut out about, I want to say 3 minutes ago. I think you were maybe 2 or 3 minutes in before it cut down. So I think you were
Okay,
maybe
so
on
we went
slide
through
2
the
or
story
3.
of Hip Company.
I'll let you get back to it.
Cool. Okay, we've gone through the
Yep.
story of Hip Company, up and coming company. They've got a ping pong table. I don't know what I've said, so you'll have to
Oh,
bear with me
Tim,
here.
I know where you were. You're up to the Nintendo Switch.
Okay, cool. So we're at Mario Karting. Cool. I like Mario Karting. This is what Hip Company does best. When the ping pong table is away because there is a meeting, the developers can still play Mario Kart. And as I was saying, during the lockdown here in the Netherlands, I did buy a Nintendo Switch because I was hopeless at Mario Kart and I wanted to start beating people. I was useless. I couldn't figure out how to skid, how to drift. So I wanted to practice and train my skills. And what do you know? Now I am pretty much undefeated champion of the company. So Hip Company is the kind of company where you've got your PS4 or PS5, as I said, but they're also the kind of company that has Friday drinks. And who doesn't like Friday drinks? Obviously, all paid for by Hip Company because you don't want to let your engineers pay for it. And again, maybe the last few years it's more like a Zoom call and a bring your own kind of drink company. But the pandemic didn't stop Hip Company being hip. And having Friday drinks is what it's all about. They enjoy socializing, de-stressing from the long week of work, and playing ping pong and Mario Kart. The tournament is still ongoing. Moving away the ping pong table if they've got a meeting for the daily stand-up on the whiteboard. After all, Hip Company is there for the drinks. They're also the kind of company that works hard, and look at them. They're all working hard with their laptops around the table. Again, pre-pandemic, obviously, because nowadays you need to keep a safe distance. And really, engineers enjoy multiple screens on the desks. They do need to see all the logs flowing in from their application, multiple screens, one for VS Code, and maybe another screen for Google or Stack Overflow on the other one. But they don't only work hard. Hip Company is the kind of company that works hard and plays harder. That's it. Hip company is the work hard but play harder company. I love this. I think the marketing or sales manager or CEO that came up with this ethos of play hard, work hard, and play harder must have been really proud of themselves. Maybe even gotten a great bonus, because who doesn't want to, after a long week of working hard, play even harder? Look at them. Look at this guy. He is definitely playing hard. Okay, maybe a little bit too much over there. Maybe a little too much playing hard. But not everything is looking all that shiny. Not everything is looking all that hip anymore. Uh, Maybe it's all that working hard and playing harder, but the company's starting to feel a bit boomerish. Yeah, so they've been running a monolithic application, and apparently they've been told that monoliths are scary and they shouldn't really be using them. Bug fixes are taking forever, and again, apparently it's because of the monolith. You can always blame the monolith. That's a good scapegoat. Maybe some unit tests are being done. They want to achieve a high percentage on their code coverage, again, because they've been told that is important. The manager, the one who came up with the play hard, work hard, play harder, needs to show a number to the CTO, and that's pretty much it. It's all a bit of a chaotic situation where the devs and the ops teams aren't really communicating, and everybody's doing their own thing. Actually, the ops team is probably more composed of some random guy who once created an S3 bucket on AWS, and he's now become the de facto ops team. He never really did ops, but now he's the ops team. So hip company is not feeling that hip anymore. What can they do? They're scratching their heads. You can see them. They're thinking, how do we become hip again? Hip company goes back into the boardroom, moving away that ping pong table, obviously. They bring in the flip chart out. You cannot really use the whiteboard. The whiteboard is there for the tournament scores, and no one's really allowed to rub them off. A few post-it notes on the flip chart. Okay, that's one way to use the flip chart. But okay, they also have with them their Lenovo ThinkPads. Yep, their trusty Lenovo ThinkPads. Yep, hip company and hip management is ready to tackle the problem. They're hip management, and they're going to find a solution to how to become hip again. So they're Googling away, they're scribbling on the post-it notes, on the flip chart, going around blogs about monoliths and how can they remove this monolith, which they cannot be using anymore because, as we said, monoliths are bad. That's what we've been told. What is the anti-monolith solution for hip company? Anti-monolith, Googling anti-monolith. I don't want the monolith anymore. Well, yeah, you've guessed it. We're going microservices. We all want to implement microservices. Everybody is talking about microservices. I want a microservice. You want a microservice. Every developer is going to get a microservice. You can get courses about microservices. So our developers will transition into microservices and understand truly what a microservice is. There's a book about going from monolith to microservices. The author actually is really good, and I do suggest reading the book. And you definitely should read it. But it's amazing. Hip company is going to go and become the microservices hip company. That's how they're going to be hip again. That's the hip way of doing things. A bit of disclaimer and spoiler there. It's not really going to be a microservice architecture. It's more of a distributed monolith. But not to worry. You don't only get microservices. Microservices is a 3-in-1 buzzword. So you're doing microservices, you're doing containers. Wait, or should I say Docker? Yeah, we'll see. It's okay. We're doing containers, and you guys know it because we're going to do containers. We need an orchestration system. Kubernetes. Yep. Hip company is going to do Kubernetes. The buzzword of the year. We're going to do Kubernetes that everybody's been talking. KubeCon EU has just been done. 10,000 people all talking about Kubernetes and how to implement Kubernetes. Hip management has decided we're going to implement it. We're going to do containers, and we're going to do microservices. So our developers are going to love this. We've got the monolith, we've got the database. How are we going to fix this monolith? It's bland. It's bland. It's not really. It's not talking to me. It talks to that one database. We don't really like monoliths. Well, there you go. So let's take the monolith. We're going to take it into microservices. Yep, obviously it's all running on Kubernetes, and it's still not looking. Still, I don't know. It's still not feeling the hipness that I want it to feel. Yeah, there you go. There's more micro. I think those are proper microservices. We've got all the microservices running on Kubernetes again. They're all in Docker. Now we need to connect them all of them up. It's a bit of a mishmash. It's okay. We're doing Kubernetes. We're doing microservices, and every microservice is connecting to that one database. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. We're doing microservices. All the microservices are talking to that one microservice in the middle, probably called common. We're doing microservices. HIP company and HIP management is happy. This is what we're going to tell our developers what they're going to be doing. Yeah. And in the meantime, our developers are thinking, what WTF? What's going on? What am I doing? What microservices? Yeah, that one person who created the S3 bucket now is probably thinking, I've got to do Kubernetes now. I'm ops. I'm Kubernetes. Why am I doing Kubernetes? It's okay. HIP management is going to sort it out. The developers will all get tickets to KubeCon. There's going to be a free trip, maybe virtual nowadays, but we're going to do it. HIP company, again, we're going to do microservices. Well, as you might have guessed, it's not really all going to plan. And that one deployment called common, every time it gets deployed, breaks everything in half. Still unsure as to who owns common, as it everyone and no one is really working on it all at the same time. Deployments are taking forever because nobody wants to touch common that relies on being updated. And the CI/CD pipelines, which were implemented by the ops team, or should I say the S3 bucket guy, take forever to run and not really report on what's going on. Nobody really talks to each other unless they're blaming each other. The poor S3 bucket guy is really getting it and needs to find a way to speed up CI/CD pipelines. Well, HIP company cannot really understand what's going on. They've told themselves, we've implemented microservices, we've implemented Kubernetes, and we've implemented containers, Docker. We've implemented all these buzzwords. Why isn't it working? What's going on? Okay, so they've gone back to the meeting room, ping pong table way. Nobody's touching that whiteboard. And they're asking themselves, what do the devs and the ops team need so that they can do better? They're scratching their heads. They're Googling on their Lenovo ThinkPad. What do the devs and the ops team need? They need to start communicating more, and they need to start communicating together. They're scratching their heads. Devs and ops. Devs teams communicating with the ops team. Devs, ops. Where are we? Yeah, of course, you've got it. We're doing DevOps. It's everywhere. We're here at DevOps Pro. We've got companies offering a one-click solution at deploying DevOps. You click that button, you've got DevOps. You can even become a DevOps engineer, whatever that means. I'm still trying to figure out what DevOps engineer is, but you can become one. There is a yearly state of DevOps analysis of the industry. So HIP management can fill out a form, and then they can compare themselves against other companies and see how hip they are by implementing DevOps. That's the way to do it. DevOps will fix everything for us. We'll be able to compare ourselves against giants like Netflix, Spotify, Google, you name it. We'll even implement the Spotify model, even though we're not Spotify. They're all doing microservices, but we're also going to be doing DevOps. Our developer and operation team, operation engineers, are now all going to become DevOps engineers. And just like microservices, yep, it's a 3-in-1 buzzword. You're not only going to get DevOps, you're also getting Agile. Yeah, Darren, there it is. We've got it. We've got Agile. You'll be shipping every 2 weeks from now. That's what Agile is. It's 2-week cycles where you can deploy your software at 2-week intervals. There's a schedule and everybody knows about them. And because you're doing agile, you're going to do Scrum. Not the rugby kind of Scrum, although maybe some engineers might feel that that would be probably preferable. But you're okay. You're doing DevOps, you're doing agile, and you're doing Scrum. Hip Company is happy. After all, the 2-week sprints need to be filled with meetings like sprint planning. You need to know what you're going to be doing during those 2 weeks so you can ship at the end of it. And obviously, the plan doesn't change at all. In those 2 weeks, you might also do a refinement of the backlog once every sprint, only once, which is more than enough. You also get daily stand-ups. Any blockers? What did you do yesterday? Don't worry about yesterday. What are you doing today? And then sprint reviews. You need to show that manager, the one who's still probably playing a little bit too hard. You need to show him the demo, and you need to display to the stakeholders what you're doing. But we've also got retrospectives, because Hip Company is all about learning and understanding what you did the previous sprint. So not sure if we're going to implement any of those learnings, but it's okay. We've implemented buzzword Scrum. We've implemented buzzword Agile. We are DevOps. Hip management is happy. We'll probably also implement a release manager, because we've got those 2-week cycles. The release manager is going to do a countdown on Friday evening. Well, just before Friday drinks, maybe, because you don't want to interrupt that. He moves away the ping pong table. He's in the corner, and he's going to shout, 3, 2, 1. And it's still a miss. It's Mount Doom. It's all chaos. It's still chaos. It's chaos ensues. There's still one database that rules them all. Everything is writing to that one database, even though we've implemented microservices. They have microservices. No one thought about the database. The developers, or should I say the DevOps engineers, they're all storing secrets in code. The CI/CD needs them so that it can be deployed with the microservices. And features are still taking months to deploy. Even though we're on 2-week cycles, bugs are being released every 2 weeks now, rather than quarterly. But the features don't really come out every 2 weeks. So all your engineers, your DevOps engineers, are screaming. They're frustrated, and Hip management have managed to completely infuriate pretty much everybody. Especially that one guy who created the S3 bucket initially. He's probably left Hip Company by now, because he doesn't want to do Kubernetes anymore, and no one knows what's going on. So now, obviously, Hip Company is completely fictitious, as I've said. But I'd love to know if you've ever dealt with a company which might be similar to Hip Company. When I've given this talk, I've usually gotten people telling me, yep, my department is very similar to this. I've faced the similar challenges. So I've created a poll, and I'd like you to answer who here has worked for or is currently working for a company which might be similar to Hip Company, not exactly the same. I'll give it a few seconds. I've been told that there might be a bit of a delay between what I'm saying and what you can see, but I'll be interested to see how people answer. I'm sure I'm not alone that resonates all of this. So I'd like to know, have you ever worked for a Hip Company which you've had to leave? Are you currently working for Hip Company? Are you shouting for help? Only a little bit resonates with this, but it's not all too bad. Or you have no clue what I'm talking about, and your current company is the best company you're working for. Skip to the next talk. I'll give it a few more seconds until everybody can see the poll and click on the respective answers. But I'd love to hear what you think of Hip Company. Does it resonate? I'll show some results. Interesting. I've got somebody who has no clue what I'm talking about. A few which, yep, are currently working for Hip Company. A bit of it resonates. Interesting to see that there are people who actually have no understanding that have no clue or have never worked for a company like Hip Company. I would love to hear the kind of company you're working for. Definitely wouldn't mind getting in touch for that. Cool. So I'll let it go on, and I'll continue. And as I do that, so what now? I've obviously said we've gone through the fictitious downfall of Hip Company, but what can we learn from Hip Company? Why did I just spend the last 10, 15 minutes shouting buzzwords at the screen and talking about Hip Company? What can be learned from it? Well, first of all, you need to completely forget about buzzwords. Stop thinking about buzzwords and how they might be the holy grail of engineering nirvana. Easier said than done. I've been shouting buzzwords through the screen, through this whole story. You've been hearing microservices, Kubernetes, DevOps, they're all floating in your head now. So how can you forget about buzzwords when everybody is talking about them? Well, the solution came to me while talking to my wife, who teaches 6 and 7-year-olds. And maybe that's a bit telling of how she manages to deal with me. But she said she tells kids to associate a word with something completely different. So, for example, if I tell you about the pink elephant, I'm fairly sure that there are quite a few of you thinking about the pink elephant right now, even though you shouldn't be thinking of the pink elephant. So associate pink elephant to something else, maybe. Something like a rainbow-colored macaw. Associate the two, and now, hopefully, when I say pink elephant, you think rainbow-colored macaw. And isn't that better? So similarly, when I say a buzzword, you want to associate that buzzword with what you're trying to achieve. If I say microservices, you should think modularity. You know, the 1960s, 70s programming technique of breaking up a large software program into smaller parts. I say microservices, you think modularity. Similarly, if I say DevOps, you should think communication between the developers and the operations team to ensure, okay, maybe a little bit too long there, so just shout out communication. If I say DevOps, you shout communication. I say DevOps, you shout communication. And this is where I'm hoping you're all shouting communication at the screen. Would have been great to do it in person, but unluckily you couldn't. The point is, we start disassociating ourselves from buzzwords. We want to communicate more. We want to make sure our program is modular. So disassociate the buzzwords from what you want to actually achieve. And once you've forgotten completely about buzzwords, you start asking questions. So something Hip management didn't really do. They just chased buzzwords. Anybody ask if your developer wanted to become a DevOps engineer? Anyone ask if Scrum is really useful for the way the developers and the operations team want to work? Nope, they didn't do that. So you want to ask what, how, and why. What are you trying to achieve or implement? Maybe it's faster release, or allowing teams to be autonomous, or improving the security of the code as you deploy it. Keep on asking, what are the goals you want to achieve? What is your North Star? And once you figured out your North Star, you then ask why. Why do I want to achieve faster releases? Why do I want to have autonomous teams? Why do I want security in my code? Do you want to achieve faster releases because that's what your customers are requesting? Or is it because the CEO is requesting them? Truly understand why you want to achieve what you want to implement. And if the answer is not acceptable to you, rethink. Don't randomly implement it. Once you've established why you're going to implement what you want to implement, analyze how you're going to do this. And it can be a multitude of options. How would you achieve faster releases? Maybe it's with microservices, as the coupling of your product isn't allowing teams to autonomously deploy themselves. Or maybe it's simply having an automated CI/CD pipeline. analyze your environment, and figure out how best to achieve what you want. Now, part of that is also giving options of how to achieve your goal. Not everybody might be on board immediately of what you're going to do and what you've decided. And giving them a different option of how to do it, as long as it achieves what and the why, they're good to go. You might want to get one team on board on how you are creating the change and have them be the proponents of what you're doing. Once the other teams see the benefit, they'll want to choose what you have provided without really forcing anybody. It should be easy for them to transition on this choice. And I mean, having the donuts forced on me wouldn't be that bad, but I digress. Once you've done that, once you've given the choices, once you've understood the what, the why, and the how, communicate. Communicate to anyone who's going to be affected, and even more. Communication is vital to ensure that your people, that the people affected are on board with the changes, but also to answer your what, why, and how questions. Developers might think differently, and they might give you the answers of your what, why, and how. You want your sales team, who are talking to your customers, to talk to the development team to ensure what they're building is what's actually wanted for the customer. You want to allow your developers to feel comfortable communicating with management about decisions being made and knowing that management is taking on board what they're saying. And one way of communicating is documentation. Yeah, dreaded documentation. I know documentation is not everyone's cup of tea, but it is extremely important. And I think I've only really ever met one engineer who truly enjoyed documentation, but he couldn't get him to stop talking. And maybe that's why he enjoyed documentation and writing stuff down so much. You document to help your developers in understanding what has been implemented. You document to show what you are trying to achieve, and in the meantime, also help you figure out the what, the why, and the how questions. You're also documenting so that in 6 months' time, you can go back and understand why the decision was made and how you are going to implement it. Documentation is also useful for onboarding. It helps engineers understand the process and how to do specific tasks. Easy onboarding of engineers is extremely important. Your next step is to automate everything and anything possible. Anything you'll be doing more than once is automatable. If it's a repeatable process, you want to automate it. And if you think this is only going to be a one-time thing, really think hard. Is it really going to be a one-time thing? Experience has taught me that it is usually not the case. You don't want to spend time clicking around buttons trying to figure out what you did last time. I was an automotive engineer previously, hence the slide, and I learned that automation can save you a lot of time. One of my first jobs was to test a component which we were selling to a car manufacturer, mainly for warranty purposes. So I'd get a vehicle from the customer which hasn't seen production, and I'd put a bucket load of sensors and instrumentation on the part we were selling to the customer. I'd then collect 3 days worth of data at milli and microseconds recordings and later analyze it all. Well, the first time I did this, one of the sensors fell off fairly early during my testing, and all the data I collected was pretty much useless. It was all zeros. So I had to get the car shipped back and redo the data. So automate all of your testing. I then learned from that mistake and automated the checking of the data I was collecting. If you're doing a repeatable process, you can automate it. A test is a repeatable process, so you can automate it. And if you forget about something, you learn from that, and then you automate what you've learned. Once you've automated, you want to automate your builds. Again, a repeatable process that can be automated. If you're using containers, definitely a repeatable process and can be automated with a script. If you're creating VMs and AMI to deploy on AWS, that's a repeatable process. A few scripts can automate all this for you. which will also reduce the cognitive load and toil on your teams, meaning your developers are focused on creating feature-rich content for business rather than figuring out how to test or how to build. All they need to do is push code to a repository, which will automatically trigger the test and the builds. And once you automate the deployments, again, a repeatable process, you want to deploy, which is repeatable. It's something you do over and over again, and hopefully more than every 2 weeks. I'm not sure if skydiving is a repeatable process for everybody, but the more adventurous among us might think that that is a repeatable process. But software deployments are definitely repeatable. And again, removing the cognitive load and toil from your developers. Now that your software has been tested, built, and deployed, all through automatable process, you'll want to monitor everything and anything possible. Yep, initially, yes, everything and anything. You might get noise, but once you figure out what is the noise and what isn't, you can tweak your monitoring. If you're not monitoring, you cannot be alerted if something is going wrong and not according to plan. If there's one thing I want you to take from this talk is that you need to monitor. Probably the thing that companies don't focus as much on, and they should. Monitoring, not only for issues, but also to understand where to improve. And if you're reaching your SLAs and SLOs, maybe you want to improve on latency to improve the experience for customers. You cannot improve on that if you're not monitoring and recording what's happening. And lastly, don't panic. Well, maybe unless you're in that toilet, you might have to panic a little bit. Things will go wrong. If you're getting alerts, don't panic. I've been in the situation where I've panicked and I've started to do the blame game. You don't want to be there. Understandably, it is natural if you do panic. Stop, breathe, and remember, it happens. As much as you try, not everything might turn out as you wish, which is why you want to monitor and log as much as you possibly can. When the shit starts hitting the proverbial fan, relax, gather all the information you need to start figuring out what's going on. What are the metrics and logs telling you? What are the processes you need to take to rectify the issue? So to recap, ask questions. You want to start off by asking what, why, and how. Once you ask that, once you think you've correctly answered those questions, communicate and document what you've done, why you've come to the solution you've chosen. Once you've communicated that, automate. Automate everything and anything possible. Anything that is repeatable and can be done with a script is automatable. You can automate your tests. You want to test your software and you want to automate the repeatable process of testing your software. Once the tests are automated, automate your builds, containers, AI, AMIs, VMs, whatever you're building. Automate the process to reduce the toil of doing that process. And finally, automate your deployments. Reduce the cognitive load on your developers and operations team in deploying your artifact, as that is a repeatable process. Once you've deployed your software and it's out in the world to be used, you want to monitor and alert. Again, monitor and alert everything and tweak as you learn what is actually needed and what is noise. As you monitor and log, go through the loop again and ask the questions. Communicate, automate test, builds, deployments, monitor, log, and alert even more. And again, ask the questions. And I'm sure I've seen this before. I've seen this diagram, and I'm sure I'm going to come up with a good buzzword for it. Finally, remember, it will be difficult. There will be challenges. Nobody gets it right at the first start. It's highly unlikely. If you do, I'm sure there will be room for improvement. You're creating a complex system. Things do break. If one cog fails and falls apart, it might affect another. Learn from that. Maybe there is a way to detach the cog from affecting the whole system and only part of it. All in all, once you've done that, you too can be buzzword compliant. I want you all to tweet and spread the next buzzword. Dev, Git, Sec, Infra, Biz, AI Ops. Flows off the tongue. Thank you for your time. I'm Tim. I hope you do have any questions. I'd love to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. Really insightful look at the cycle and exactly how we need to break that cycle of unneeded buzzwords. But I guess maybe first thing on my mind is, buzzwords, they can be bad, but they're not all bad, right?
Um, no, so not all buzzwords are bad. It's how you implement the buzzword, which could be bad. So I love microservices. I actually think microservices is a great concept. I am a CKA. I've got my certificate for CKA because I think Kubernetes is a really good tool. But not everybody needs Kubernetes. Again, truly understand what you want to achieve and then implement the appropriate tool. So buzzwords aren't really a problem. It's how, the implementation and how the buzzword is implemented, which can be a problem.
Yeah, it's that whole process of like everyone else is doing it, so we feel the need to do it. So I guess maybe that's why these companies keep doing it, right? It's like if it's a trend, they feel like they need to be on it because if they're not on it, they're not quirky, they're not ahead of the curve, they're not the cool kids, right? There's kind of this
Exactly.
pressure.
Exactly. And it is like Kubernetes came out of Google, a big company, a big successful company. And this is why companies want to emulate what big companies are doing and emulate what buzzwords they're using. So it is understandable. But again, not everybody Spotify, not everybody can use the Spotify model. Nowadays, not even Spotify uses the Spotify model. So again, understand what you want to achieve and start implementing those buzzwords.
Yeah, I think it's that kind of idea is like identifying when you've got kind of like this bloatware situation, right? Where, I mean, something I was always taught from an early point is, sometimes taking things away is adding more, right? So
Yeah,
sometimes it's not about just taking on all these new methods. Sometimes it's about actually just stripping away the unnecessary components.
yeah, exactly.
So it looks like we have got a question from Christianus. He says, what about situations where you cannot interpret buzzwords or their desires in the more charitable or reasonable way and don't actually have the privilege of making your own choices, whether it's, corporate policies or maybe contractual obligations?
Yeah, interesting. So there are industries where you do have to implement a specific method of doing things.
Hmm.
Um, I'd say try and alleviate the pain of implementing the buzzword a little bit more by communicating with your developers as much as possible on saying, look, again, communication extremely important. Understanding developers need to understand that something does need to be implemented because of regulation. How can we alleviate the pain of doing that as much as possible? And communication is very important there. Hopefully, hip management, will listen to you and take on board what you're saying.
I mean, they're saying they're hip, so you'd hope, right? As long as you make it sound cool. That I get where the concerns come from, right? Because like there are legal requirements sometimes. Also, it's the case of like the stubbornness, like what they're familiar with, as well as like the pressure. Everyone else is doing it. We should be doing it too. So it is definitely an interesting point that gets risen there. I guess kind of what I'm thinking is like where do you kind of draw the line? Like, do you feel that this is an issue at like a leadership level with these buzzwords being applied? Like, does there need to be a lot more listening going on to the lower end employees?
Yeah, definitely, and feeling safe within the company so that you can communicate with leadership and management is extremely important here. Uh, Sometimes even engineers take the buzzword challenge. I've seen people go, "Ooh, this is a new technology. I want to put it in," and I do that myself as well. Talk to my wife about all the home automation system I have and how it's driving her crazy. Uh, and engineers do that. We enjoy the challenge, but truly understand what kind of challenge you're putting yourself up to.
Yeah, once again, it's that kind of proof in the pudding type situation, right? Like, if there is a case for this, you should be able to present it and not just say, "Oh, Google done this," right? Or SpaceX does this. Like, yeah, why do they like make a tangible correlation with what is the outcome? Why are they doing this, and what is it actually leading to? Does it match us? 'Cause I think you've actually made a very fair point that there's this overlapping where like everyone's like, yep, got to do that because there's a tick box right now. Like it's the year 2022. Let me just pull my pen off and we'll tick down the buzzword box because otherwise we're falling
Yeah.
behind. And there is a lot of external pressure, but I agree with what you were saying that it comes down to communicating as an employee with the uppers, and sometimes that does involve that awkward situation where you know it's not going to work, and they're telling you still to do it anyway, and they're going to have to learn the hard way. But I think there's a correct attitude of always still saying this is wrong because eventually, if you keep being the always right guy,
Yeah.
someone has to listen to you.
Yeah. As I said, mistakes are going to happen. You learn from them, move forward.
All right. Well, I think that rounds us out nicely. It looks like we're just about to go over with this session, so we'll quickly close this one out. Thank you, Tim. It has been an absolute pleasure to hear your thoughts on how to implement buzzwords, and hopefully we'll be seeing more of you in the future.
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.